A lot of people aren't stuck because they refuse to move. They're stuck because they never stop long enough to ask whether the movement means anything. Welcome to the Rebellious Remedy. I'm Jonathan Ennis, founder of Dream Root Wellness. Here we return to Christ as the foundation of true health, body, mind, heart, and spirit, so we can steward our lives in faithful obedience to God's design. If you're ready to walk this out with others, you're invited to join the Dream Root Wellness Network. Join today at community.dreamrootwellness.com. Welcome back. Last week we talked about planning. We talked about direction. We talked about refusing to drift, about taking vision and turning it into something practical. This week, we need to talk about assessment, because making a plan isn't enough. You also have to stop and ask, is this actually working? That question matters more than most people realize. A lot of people are doing things. They're really trying, working hard, staying busy, and putting in effort, but they never pause long enough to ask whether that effort is producing fruit. So they confuse effort with progress. And that's dangerous, because you can be sincere and still be wrong. You can be disciplined and still be misdirected. You can be consistent and still be building something that isn't taking you where you need to go. That's why assessment matters. Assessment cuts through the noise. It cuts through the emotion, the excuses, the assumptions, and the stories people tell themselves so they don't have to face reality. And that's a good thing, because assessment isn't about guilt or shame. It isn't about obsessing over yourself or becoming hypercritical and discouraged. It's about clarity. It's how you make sure your daily actions line up with your goals, your values, and the life God's calling you to build. Because if you're blindly pushing forward without ever stopping to assess, you're not really growing. You're drifting. This really starts with integrity. Because if you can't be honest with yourself, if you can't be honest with God, you can't change. That's why integrity is the first root of wellness. Not because it sounds noble, because it's necessary. You have to be able to look at your life, your habits, your direction, your effort, and the fruit you're producing and say, what's actually true here? Not what do I hope is true, not what sounds good or better, not what protects my pride, what's actually true. 2 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 5 says, examine yourselves to see whether you are in faith. Test yourselves. Can't you see for yourselves that Jesus Christ is in you unless you actually fail the test? That's not soft language. Examine yourselves. Test yourselves. That means God doesn't call his people to live half awake, drifting through life, refusing to look closely. He calls us to be honest and self-examine. And while that verse speaks first to faith, the principle reaches wider. If you're going to steward your body, your mind, your heart, your time, your calling, and your future well, then you have to be willing to assess your life honestly. Otherwise, you're building on guesses. One of the clearest places I did this was in the early years of my business. Dream Root Wellness started as a seed in my mind back in 2017 when I was a brand new physician assistant working in pain management. The first nudge came through a simple conversation with my medical assistant. We were talking about herbal approaches to pain, and she joked that I ought to start going to people's houses and consulting with them on lifestyle and herbal treatments. She was real country. She said, I believe you and me could do it, Johnny boy. That stuck with me. The seed stayed there. Sometimes I'd think about it. Sometimes I'd nourish it a little. Then I'd move on. By 2019, I took it more seriously and formally founded Dream Root Wellness. But if I'm being honest, I was still mostly drifting. I'd work on it here and there when I could find the time. Sometimes that meant a night or two a week, sometimes a week or two a month. Sometimes months would go by before I even touched it again. When I did work on it, I did feel like I was doing something important, but deep down, I knew it wasn't really working. Blog post nobody read, community post in a tiny, unengaged community I'd built mostly from my Facebook friends, bits and pieces of business activity, but no real impact. I was comfortable enough in my PA career that I could tolerate the illusion of it all. That's what bad assessment allows. It allows you to live off the feeling of effort, the feeling that you're doing something important instead of the truth of the fruit you're producing. And that can go on a long time if you let it. To be honest, this is something I've had to learn more than once. There was another season where this became undeniable, and that was during my paramedic years. I was working for a private ambulance service in Louisville. I was doing what they called 12-hour shifts on a 2-week rotation. 1 week, 3 days, the next week, 4 days on repeat. But they weren't really 12-hour shifts. They regularly turned into 14, 16, 18-hour shifts because we kept getting held over on runs. Then I had an hour drive each way on top of that. So I was sometimes effectively working 20-hour days, 4 days in a row. I'd get home at 4 in the morning, eat the hearty meal my wife had left for me in the fridge. That is, if I hadn't already stopped at White Castle or Burger King on the way home. And sometimes, even if I had, to be honest, sleep a few hours and then get up and do it all again. I was fat. I was exhausted, unhealthy, stressed. I was putting strain on my marriage. I was even falling asleep sitting up in church on Sunday mornings when I was off of work. And I lied to myself in that season. I told myself things like, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. You can sleep when you're dead. That isn't wisdom. That's self-deception dressed up like toughness. And eventually the truth forced itself on me. One of the clearest moments was when I threw my back out, leaning over a patient to start an IV. It was ridiculous. I wasn't doing anything dramatic, but I hurt myself badly enough that I could barely walk for weeks, and it took nearly a full year for the pain to fully resolve. That moment helped confirm what I already needed to admit. I couldn't keep living like that. That's what honest assessment does. It forces you to stop romanticizing a broken path. That season pushed me to make a hard decision. At the urging of my wife, I went back to school to become a physician assistant. That wasn't just planning. It started with assessment. I had to look honestly at my current path, my marriage, my health, and the future I said I wanted, and admit that the road I was on wasn't going to get me there. My wife and I wanted a family. We wanted to have kids, but neither of us saw how that would be possible with me working like that, working like a dog, but still living paycheck to paycheck. Once that truth was clear, I had to make a plan to get off that road. Later in PA school, I had to assess again. When I first started school at Sullivan University, I thought I'd be able to keep working part-time as a paramedic and at a plasma center to help carry the financial burden. Classes started in July, and by October, it was obvious my grades were slipping. Again, assessment told the truth. Not what I wanted to be true, what was actually true. So I had to stop working entirely and make school the priority, even though that meant relying on student loans and my wife's income, which was a whole other difficulty on its own. But that's the role of assessment. It tells you when your current strategy isn't sustainable. It tells you when your effort is misaligned. It tells you when your pride is trying to keep you on a road that wisdom says to leave. This principle also started becoming clear to me in healthcare long before Dream Root Wellness ever existed. Even back in paramedic training at Eastern Kentucky University, I had a professor named Danny who used to say over and over again with enthusiasm, "Why are we responding to all these emergencies we could prevent?" That drilled something into me. The best kind of healthcare is proactive, not reactive. At the time, I didn't yet fully understand how reactive our whole medical system really is. Later in pain management, I saw it up close. I saw the same patients over and over and over again. People desperate for relief. Relief from chronic pain, relief from chronic disease, relief from chronic frustration. They were doing what they were told, taking the prescriptions, following the plans, getting the injections, and they were still suffering. That was one of the biggest awakening moments of my career because it made the question impossible to ignore. Are we actually helping people move toward health, or are we just managing symptoms inside of a broken system? That question pushed me into deeper study, lifestyle changes, herbalism, psychology, spiritual care. I researched all of it, and out of that came a program I called Total Pain Control, a whole person approach to pain, physical, mental, and spiritual. Now, that program never launched, but it became part of the foundation for Dreamroot Wellness, and the lesson underneath it stayed the same. If you never assess the real problem, you'll keep throwing effort at symptoms and wondering why nothing fundamentally changes. That same principle hit my business too. There came a point where I had to admit that Dreamroot Wellness wasn't aligned with what I knew in my soul. I knew God had created me for more. I knew I was softening Christ in the business and curriculum. I knew I was putting Jesus in one small corner instead of making him the center. And by doing that, I was stripping the whole thing of power, because there's no such thing as true health disconnected from Jesus Christ. I knew that to be true, but I was still marketing my business to the general population. I was already feeling the conviction, already wrestling with the calling, already trying in some ways to ignore it because of fear of driving people away from a business that barely had an audience anyway. I told myself lies then too. If you minimize Jesus, you can reach more people and do more good. That sounds strategic, but compromise is what it really was. Then Charlie Kirk got assassinated, and that moment shook something loose in me. Here was a godly man who was younger than even I am, working to advance God's kingdom, and he effectively died for it. But I was running from that work. How timid, how cowardly. I remember praying and writing in my journal, in essence, God, I know you have so much more for my life. Reveal to me my purpose. And within days, through scripture and confirmation of the Holy Spirit, I knew clearly that Dreamroot Wellness was meant to serve Christians specifically, to help restore health and wellness within the body of Christ as stewardship under Christ. That was assessment two. Painful, clarifying, necessary assessment. What am I actually doing to advance God's kingdom? That question changed the direction of the whole business. For me, bad assessment often looks like overcomplication. I'm analytical by nature, which means when I'm not careful, I can overthink, overplan, and get stuck in paralysis by analysis. That isn't honest assessment either. It's just another way of avoiding effective action. Good assessment for me is much simpler. I track the critical tasks for the day and check them off as I go. Then I can look back and ask, what got done? What got missed? Why did I miss it? What can I do differently moving forward? That kind of assessment works because it's grounded, it's concrete, it's honest. It leads to daily action. And that's what real assessment should do. Not just help you notice things, but it should help you course correct. So how do you do this in your own life without turning it into self-obsession or mental paralysis? Mainly, it's by keeping it simple. But I have 4 specific things to help guide you. And then we'll talk about an actual framework you can use for assessing. Number 1, set clear checkpoints. Don't just feel it out. Set aside time to assess. Weekly is usually strong enough to keep you awake without making you obsessive. A checkpoint gives you space to stop and ask, what happened this week? What worked? What didn't? What needs to change? That small habit can save you months of drift. Number 2, tell the truth. This is the heart of it. Be honest. If you were inconsistent, say that. If your plan was unrealistic, say that. If you were lazy, distracted, or fearful, say that. Watered down assessment leads to watered down growth. Number 3, track what actually matters. Don't assess based on feelings. Track what actually matters. More strength, more clarity, more consistency, more peace, more follow through. Those are real indicators. Number 4, refine without ego. If it isn't working, change it. No shame, no defending a plan that's clearly failing, just wisdom, pivoting instead of quitting. Now, here's that framework you can use to assess. When you sit down to assess, ask 4 questions. Number 1, what's working? What's actually producing fruit right now? What habits are helping? What routines are strengthening you? What boundaries are protecting you? What practices are actually building health, peace, and momentum? Number 2, what's not working? Where are things breaking down? Where are you inconsistent? Where are you forcing something unsustainable? Where are you still making excuses in your life? Number 3, what's getting in the way? Name the real obstacles. Distraction, poor sleep, fear, shame, overcommitment, comfort seeking, lack of planning, lack of integrity. Number 4, what needs to change next? Decide what to adjust. Not 10 things all at once, 1 or 2 clear things. That's enough. Assessment should lead to course correction, not overwhelm. Now, I do have a task I want you to complete this week. Take an honest look at one area of your current wellness journey, not to condemn yourself, to get clear. Step 1, pick one area where growth matters to you right now. Physical health, mental clarity, emotional steadiness, spiritual consistency. Just start with one. Step 2, review your current approach. Ask yourself, what has been my goal in this area? What have I been doing to grow in this area? Have I actually been consistent? Am I seeing the kind of progress I expected? Is this approach realistic and sustainable? What's been helping me? What's been holding me back? Write down what you see. For example, you might say, I've been trying to improve my sleep, but I keep staying on my phone too late. I've been more consistent with walking, and it's helping my energy. I say I want peace, but I keep filling my day with noise on devices. My routine looks good on paper, but it falls apart because I never planned for real obstacles. Step 3, identify the pattern. Ask what pattern keeps showing up. Is it distraction, poor planning, all or nothing thinking, overcommitment, comfort seeking, emotional reactivity? Find the pattern beneath the problem. Step 4, adjust the plan. Make 1 or 2 clear changes. Simplify the routine, move the habit to a better time of day, reduce a distraction, prepare in advance, build in accountability, shorten the task so it's easier to repeat, reconnect the habit to a stronger reason why. Keep it practical. Step 5, keep the momentum going. Don't let one rough week become a spiral. Slow progress is still progress. What matters is that you stay engaged, stay honest, and keep adjusting. You may find it helpful to simplify this. In that case, just try to write a short response to these following questions. What has been working for me? What have I learned about what isn't working? What one change will I make this week? Honestly, that's enough to start. So assessment isn't about guilt. It's about clarity. It's how you cut through the noise, how you stay honest. It's how you keep moving forward with wisdom instead of assumptions. So keep assessing, keep adapting, keep building, because the enemy counts on you either quitting when things get hard or sleepwalking when things get unclear. Don't give him either. Stay awake, stay honest, stay sharp, and next week, we're going to move into reflecting, because once you've learned how to plan and assess, the next step is learning how to slow down, process what God is showing you, and gather wisdom from the road you've already walked.